Hi, Victor Cheng here from CaseInterview.com. Today I'll be talking about the question, can you have work-life balance in management consulting? And the short answer is, I think it's possible, but it's not easy. And I want to share a couple of key things you can do to tilt your work-life balance more in favor of having a life. Right? And so a couple things. First of all, there are two parts that make consulting demanding. One is the sheer number of hours worked in the office, or we're just working. The other is the travel, right? And those two factors drive how much time you have for your own life. So one of the most useful things to do is to cut out travel. And the easiest way to do that is to pick an industry that is based in the city that your office is located in. So for example, I worked in the New York City office of McKinsey, and most of my clients were financial services clients. Wall Street, banks, the financial institutions, and nearly so many of them were headquartered, in New York City. So a lot of my work was in town, so I didn't have to jump on an airplane. In contrast, if I work in oil and gas, the oil and gas industry, most of the clients are in Houston and Dallas. Coming from New York, I have to fly, right, every week to meet clients potentially. So you want to try to pick an industry that you serve and get specialized in that's local to the particular office that you are in. So that's the one thing to minimize amount of travel. The second is to be mindful of the industry culture, right? Consulting firms typically meet with clients during the client's business hours. Now, every industry has a slight difference of opinion on what business hours are. So the one that was always the worst, for some of my colleagues was working for investment banking clients, because having a meeting at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, midnight was like not a big deal because they were all in the office anyway. And so it wasn't considered unusual. And so oftentimes when I served financial services clients like that, they're a 24-hour culture. So, I was sending them documents to review at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they got them and reviewed them because they were already up in some cases, or up shortly thereafter. So notice the culture of the industry that you're serving and try to skew towards those industries that are a bit more 9 to 5, right? If they work 9 to 5 and you kind of work 9 to 6, you're already working more than they are, and it sort of works much better. Then there's the culture of the client themselves. Some companies have a company culture of working all day, all night, every single day of the week, right? Guess what? If they're working 7 days a week, you are too, right? So being mindful of the culture of the clients that you serve, particularly on a long-term basis, it's a little harder on the short term, can also help with that as well. Other factors, first-time clients versus repeat clients. First-time clients are brutal. So at McKinsey, we used to have this term called an O1, right? So the billing code for McKinsey clients would be like the initials of the client, 123 company or ABC company or XYZ company, and then 001, meaning it's the first engagement for XYZ company. Okay? And so whenever we talk in the hallways and people would be saying, hey, what are you working on? I'm working on an O1, a 01 project. That meant we weren't seeing that person socially anytime soon because they were going to get crushed. Trying to over-deliver and really impress that first-time client on the first engagement in hopes that that would lead to more engagements. Okay? So the model there really is under-promise, massively over-deliver, really show them a lot of attention and get them hooked on working with the firm on a long-term basis. Right? Clients that have been around for decades might have, engagement number 196, right? That's 196 engagements, over 50 years. A lot of revenue changing hands. And in those cases, those are more relaxed, right? There's nothing to prove. The relationship is established. It's secure. You just got to do the work. Much easier lifestyle-wise. Finally, the other factor is the partner. The partner on the project makes a huge difference. There are two kinds of sort of partners. Those that are, senior people, maybe a better word. Anytime a partner or partner-like person is about to be promoted or about to be fired, right? They're in that sort of window that determines whether they make it to the next step of their career. They tend to panic and freak out, and they tend to run their teams very, very hard, right? So I had multiple people that were up for partnership at McKinsey that were, sort of the senior person on the team. And man, we worked hard, right? Because they were so nervous about not making it. They didn't want to leave anything to chance. And they were creating a lot of extra work, a lot of it unnecessary. and it made our lives very difficult. Okay? A partner or senior person that's knows how to manage really well and manage client expectations, like, makes a huge difference, right? And so compare notes with the people that you work with. Find out who the partners are that are really good at managing client expectations, still delivering great value, but doing it in a way where teams don't burn out. I think that's a very useful insider knowledge to try to figure out within a company. So those are a couple sort of more structural things that you can do to really try to tilt yourself more towards the work-life, the life part of the work-life balance. The other skills that are really useful, they're more individual, right? Less about picking industries and picking people that you work with, more about how you manage yourself. So a couple things come to mind. First is there's this rule called the 80-20 rule, right? What is the 20% of what you do that produces 80% of the results? And that's going to vary a little bit by engagement and by client, but it's important to figure out where the impact is. And so for me, in most of the arc of my career in consulting, it was the headlines, right? It was like the one chart. It was the one insight that was very counterintuitive, opposite of what the client believed to be true, but I had empirical data proving it was true, right? So they thought they were profitable, and I showed them they were actually losing money. Whoa, wow, that's a big deal. Okay? So if I had to boil down my McKinsey career in terms of the inflection points where I made the biggest difference, over multiple years, it was probably less than 6 minutes a year, honestly, right? The one chart, like, wow, revelation. So I'll give you an example. I had a client I worked on, one of my first ones, and I did an analysis around, like, one division of their business was over $1 billion in assets, and did the calculations and figured out the analysis and realized, man, they're losing a ton of money. And this was sort of the part of the business that people were ignoring. And my recommendation was, you should sell it. Get rid of it. It's not your core business. It's not profitable. There's some historical reasons for why it wasn't profitable. And that was like a 30-minute meeting. They made the decision to sell it, and 5 months later, they sold it for $980 million, right? And like, that was like a big moment for me at my first year, at the firm. So things like that. There's always like this one chart in every deck that's like the headline chart, like, wow, like, didn't know that. That's really interesting. I wouldn't have expected that, like that. So what you're looking for when you do your work is the one killer chart, the one killer idea, the one killer counterintuitive conclusion that's supported, and like that wows your audience. So that's where you get the most leverage. The rest is, in some respects, noise, right? So you want to get into the mentality of optimizing for the killer chart. If there's just regular work to be done, you still got to do it. But does it have to be done right now? Not always. Does it have to be done at the level of detail that people are wishing for? Push back. It may not be, because it doesn't change the outcome, the course, and the trajectory of the business. But if you have, like, you're on to a hypothesis that, if proven, becomes the killer chart, then you go all out on that, because that makes your year, right? That makes your year. So it's having a sense of that. So that's useful to note, is what is the big leverage point, in your work, and really double down on the things that matter and pull back on the things that don't. Other tips, pushing back, managing upwards. If they ask for all this data, like, what's the minimum necessary to derive the correct, logical, fact-based conclusion? Oftentimes people ask for the world because, like, why not? They're not doing the work, you are, right? It's easy to ask. But if you look at it and say, hey, if we do this level of detail versus this other level of detail, does our conclusion change, right? Is it going to change the answer of what we recommend to the client? And if not, is it really necessary to do the 4 hours of extra work to get that extra level of detail that doesn't change the conclusion, it doesn't change the headline on the slide, it doesn't change the recommendation to the client? And if it doesn't, like, do we really need to do it, right? And to push back and counter-propose an alternative that still gives the right answer to the client. So those are a couple tools that I've used to pick situations that are more lifestyle friendly, things I've done myself to manage my own time. And then the last thing I'll leave you with is to recruit help. Get really good at getting clients involved and having them do as much work as possible. This is good for a few reasons. One, less work for you, right? Two, it gets more buy-in, right? If they are doing the work, rather than this outsider doing the work, and they're more involved, there's just more buy-in overall in the company culture. The other thing, too, is it's a good opportunity for them. Usually when a consulting firm comes in, the consultants present to a higher level of senior management than the people who sort of do the work day to day. So when you can recruit from sort of the individual contributors in the company, not necessarily the senior executives, and involve them, it gives them a chance to have exposure and to get recognition from people that are more senior. And one of the things I used to do a lot was I would thank and credit the individual contributor clients that contributed to the slides and the work that I did. And I would say, hey, working with Stuart was amazing. Like, oh my goodness, I just cannot say enough good things. Really helpful, really a great contributor to the team, right? And that looks good for Stuart, as an example. So those are some things to leverage your resources, really be hyper-focused on the things that matter, really try to push back on the level of work that isn't necessary to kind of get to the right conclusion, and then pick your situations that tend to be more lifestyle friendly. If you can do that, you end up more on the lifestyle side of the scale. But even so, it's still a pretty demanding profession. And by the way, there are certain cities, I should mention, that they work harder. New York is one of them. Maybe Los Angeles, not as much, right, in comparison to New York. So that's something to keep in mind too, is pick those situations that tend to be more lifestyle friendly overall. And then within that, use the right skills to minimize your workload while still being hyper effective. So anyways, hope that helps. And thanks everyone and have a great day.